بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So today, subhanallah, because all the students have exams, whether it's Arabic and then Qaida Arba' and then Tafsir, we sent a message out saying that lessons are cancelled apart from that one, so that students can revise. But obviously I sent that into the input syllabus and I wasn't intending that the Quran class was cancelled. The Quran class is easy, you don't need to revise or anything, alhamdulillah, generally it's quite easy going. However, I do understand why somebody may think it's cancelled. That's why I think next time we do need to put a disclaimer that it doesn't include the Quran class, or it does include the Quran class, which shouldn't be a problem, inshallah. والنماز पढ़ रहे हैं उधर माइक ऑन है ऑफ कर लूँगा साइड डाउन हाँ बंद है नो जज़ाकल्लाह सही है जज़ाकल्लाह खैर. And so therefore obviously most students have not turned up, there's only a few of you, but no problem, inshallah. We'll still continue to learn. Numbers should not affect the progress of something. And subhanallah, there's a story, and this story I always use it as an example, and I think it's a really beautiful story, and it really shows how numbers do not have an effect on the success of something. Numbers is not a factor of the success of something. It's not a measuring stick to measure the success of something, even though it can be a factor sometimes in terms of, you do want to reach the most amount of people, but it's not a underlying measuring stick to measure the success of something. And this is a famous story of Imam Ibn Sa'di rahimahullah. You can say Sa'di, you can say Sa'di. And Imam Sa'di rahimahullah, he has a very famous tafsir which is known as Tafsir al-Sa'di. It's got a longer name, but it's known as Tafsir al-Sa'di. And not only that, he has got so many other books as well. So many other books. And he was teaching, one day he was teaching Qawa'id Ibn Rajab. This is a book in Qawa'id Fiqhiyah, Legal Maxims, written by Imam Ibn Rajab rahimahullah. And it's a high level book. It's not the first book you study in this field. You study it later on. So he started teaching this book, and he had many students, right? Tens or hundreds of students, however many there were. You can just imagine the masjid was packed, let's just say that. But as time went on, slowly what happens after the first lesson? Students drop out. Got less and less until only one student finished with him. Only one student finished the book with him. Now firstly, subhanAllah, that shows the sincerity of this Imam. He didn't turn around and he said, look, no one's attending anymore, so therefore forget it. He didn't say forget it, but rather he continued, so that at least this one student can benefit. And this one student finished this book. And guess who this student was? This student was Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah. This one student was Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah. And now, look at the effect of Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah. So maybe the benefit of Imam Sa'di, even though he had benefit in terms of his tafsir and other works and so on, but if you were to look at just if you put this book to the side, in terms of students, you might turn around and think, he's not really got many, right? Or in terms of immediate effect in other areas, he didn't really have much of an effect. But look at the effect that Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah had. And all of that would be in the scales of good deeds of whom? Imam Sa'di. Imam Sa'di rahimahullah had two main students, Ibn Aqil and Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah. And all of us, or most of us, we have benefited from Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah either directly or indirectly. Directly, either from his books. Right? And his books, especially as a beginner student of knowledge, is like the first book, the first Arabic books that you would read. his Sharh of Usul al-Thalatha, his Sharh of Al-Arba'un al-Nawawiyah, and so many other books. Or sometimes, and he goes to high level stuff as well, like his 15-volume explanation of Zad al-Mustaqni', or his 15-volume explanation of Bulugh al-Maram. You know, his explanation of Zad is known as Al-Mumti', Sharh al-Mumti'. And his explanation of Bulugh al-Maram is known as Fathu Dhil Jalali wal Ikram, fi Sharh Bulugh al-Maram, or something along those lines. And he's got so many other books. He's got Fatawa, Nurun ala Darb, which is about 12, 13 volumes as well. Just Fatawa, him being asked questions of Fatawa. He's got Durus al-Haramain al-Sharifin, all the lessons he gave in Al-Haramain al-Sharifin, Masjid Nabawi and Masjid al-Haram. And that is voluminous as well, that's even bigger. Maybe over 20 volumes. Right? And there's so many other books, like I mentioned. He's got one whole book which is known as Su'al al-Hatif, I believe. Which is all just the phone calls that he got and answers that he gave us a whole thick volume. He's got another one called Su'al fi al-Tariq, or Ala al-Tariq, something like that. That came out a few years ago. There was one scholar, one sheikh, who was a student of Ibn Uthaymeen, who used to, as Ibn Uthaymeen would walk from the masjid to his house, he would accompany him and ask him questions. So he gathered all of these questions and all of these answers, one thick volume. That's Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah. And then, that's the books that he's got now. Like, there's not a science except he's got a book in there where there's an explanation of his own book. He's authored own books and he's got explanations. And his students had, transcribed a lot of his explanations and so on. Or if you didn't benefit from Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah directly, you benefited from the students of Ibn Uthaymeen. For example, you guys benefited from Shaykh Haytham Sarhan, his explanation of Usul al-Thalatha and Qawad Arba'. He's a student of Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah. Right? And Ibn Uthaymeen has so many students. Shaykh Khalid Mashaykh who came a few weeks ago, one of the main students of Ibn Uthaymeen. He's the one that transcribed Sharh al-Mumti' and others. And there's so many other. Even Shaykh Muhsin Qasim studied with Ibn Uthaymeen for a little while. And there's so many, students, Shaykh Sami Saqir, Shaykh Khalid Muslih, and so many more who studied with Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah. So the point being is that numbers is not a indication of the success of something. And that's why in the hadith of Prophet ﷺ, he said that on the day of judgment there will be a prophet, وَمَعَهُ الرَّهْطِ, he will have just a small group of people, 3 to 10. وَالنَّبِيُّ وَمَعَهُ الرَّجُلُ وَالرَّجُلَانِ, and a prophet will come and he'll only have 1 or 2 people with him, 1 or 2 followers. وَالنَّبِيُّ لَيْسَ مَعَهُ أَحَدٌ, and there'll be a prophet that will have no one with him, no followers whatsoever. Are we going to say that this prophet failed? La. You can't say that. Okay? So numbers is not a measuring tool. And likewise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says the opposite. وَإِن تُطِعْ أَكْثَرَ مِنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ يُضِلُّكَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. If you were to follow the majority of the people on the earth, يُضِلُّكَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, they will guide you astray. They will guide you away from the path of Allah, i.e. from the straight path. And that's why if you look at the likes of Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, who's known as Imam Ahl Sunnah, the Imam of Ahl Sunnah, why was he given this title? Because of his mihnah. What happened in his mihnah? His trial, his test. This is when he came to an aqeedah issue, al-qawlu bi khalq al-Qur'an, that Ahl Bid'ah was saying at the time that the Qur'an is created. And a person doesn't understand, how grave this statement is. This is a statement of kufr. Why? Because the Qur'an is a speech of Allah, and the speech is a characteristic of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, the characteristic of something takes the same qualities as the thing itself. If I say a human's hand, what hand are you going to think about? You're going to think about this type of hand, right? Why? Because it's connected to a human. And if I say a human speech, you're going to think of words like I'm speaking English now. But if I say an elephant's hand, the nature of the hand is going to change. And if I say an elephant's speech, you're not going to imagine an elephant speaking English. It's going to be, the noise that it makes. Right? Likewise, if I say a fox's speech, what does a fox say? Right. Likewise, and so on. The point being is that the characteristic of something follows the thing that it is describing. So a person who says that the Quran is created is basically saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is created. Na'udhu billahi min dhalik. Allah Ta'ala is a creator. So anyways, what happened was, many of the Amir at the time, he was forcing ulama to spread this battle. And the ulama, one by one, were giving in. One by one, they were giving in, even if they didn't believe it. And that's why Imam Ahmad, even from great muhaddithin, he rebuked them. I think it might have been Ali ibn Madini, right? Who is from the greatest muhaddithin of the Salaf. He even gave in. And Imam Ahmad told him off. Right? And he told him, because you shouldn't have done that. And he was very angry with them. He was very upset with them. Anyways, there was nobody left apart from Imam Ahmad and his friend and so on, but even he, passed away, rahimahullah, and so on. The point being is that basically there was only Imam Ahmad left. He was the only one saying, no, the Quran is a speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he was imprisoned, he was tortured, he was whipped, everything. And they only let him go when they were like, alright, we're gonna end up killing him if we keep torturing him. And even then they put him in house arrest and so on. Then he had patience until the next Khalifa came, and then finally the Sunnah became apparent. But subhanAllah, what does that show us? What was the truth at the time? What was the haqq? That the Quran is a speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How many people were saying it from the ulama? One. One person was saying it. And what was everybody else saying? And all of the other scholars saying? The opposite. So somebody turns around and says, well, you're going against all of these scholars. We say that's not necessarily a proof. Because the truth is not measured by the number of people that follow it. It is measured by what? By the Quran and the Sunnah. Obviously, if there's an issue and many ulama for Ahlul Sunnah agree upon, it shouldn't be just pushed to the side easily. It's still an authority, it should be respected, especially if you have an opinion, let's say the four madhahib will agree upon. Right? And then maybe you take an opinion of another scholar, no problem, but it shouldn't be something that you just dismiss. You can't go to that extreme as well. But the point we're making is that the success of da'wah, the success of in Islam is not measured by the number of people. So that's very important to keep in mind, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. As for the Quran class, as we said, we're not going to take much because they're not here today because of the confusion regarding the lesson. However, what we will mention is some general advices regarding the Quran. A lot of people ask how to memorize the Quran, and there's many different ways, and I don't want to go into them, right? So Shaykh Masih Qasim has his own way of repeating everything 20 times, each ayah 20 times, and then the whole thing 20 times, and so on. And the reality is that it differs from person to person. I memorized the Quran, I didn't do 20. I had my own way of doing it. And other people have their own way of doing it. Some people, like my way generally was that I would learn it at night, but let's say the page I'm learning, but I wouldn't know it strongly. And after Fajr, that's when I would make it strong. Then after Dhuhr was the class and I would read the teacher. But some students, what they do is that they learn it strong, ayah by ayah. One ayah, they don't move on until the ayah is strong, then the second ayah is strong, then the third ayah is strong, then they put everything together, and that's it. They've done half a page, and that's strong. And then they learn a new half a page after Fajr, for example. So everyone's got a different way. Yeah? So you have to work out what your way is. You have to work out what works best for you. And that takes time, trial and testing, trial and error. That's going to take time. But there are certain principles which are general for the Quran. The first is that you need a teacher. The first is that you need a teacher, especially for memorizing Quran. You cannot know how to correctly recite the Quran, nor know if you are correctly memorizing the Quran unless you recite it to a teacher, and that teacher guides you. If you try to learn it from the books, you won't understand. Sometimes there are things which are very, very delicate and very, very, subhanAllah. I heard ulama say that my father was a scholar, but he wasn't a specialist in the Quran. Especially back in the day, when there was less recordings and so on. He said once he listened to a recording of some sheikh, one of the great, Qurra, and he tried imitating him because he was doing a different riwayah, and he completely butchered it. Like it was one letter, he said a completely different letter, because he's not studied, he's not recited Quran in that. So even in Qira'at, there's different things. You have an alif wa duha, then you have taqleel, known as imala sughra, which is wa duha, then you have imala kubra wa duhi, and you have to like really differentiate between all of them, and it's difficult. It's not just listen once and you just copy. Although if you do that, the person who knows the Quran is just going to laugh at you because you're just messing up. Just like if in simple terms, a freshie was to speak English, they might think they're speaking correctly, but you can tell, right? So you really need a teacher, and he'll guide you how much to memorize. He'll tell you, no, you're making mistakes. He is okay. You need to work on this. Okay, your revision's too weak. We need to stop, and you need to revise now, and so on. The second is, if you want to become a hafiz, you have to spend a lot of time. You have to spend many hours. As a general rule, is a person who wants to memorize the Quran, 1 hour a day isn't really enough. 1 hour here and there isn't enough. You got to be spending 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours a day. Right? So most people that go to these madrasas to memorize the Quran, they memorize in UK 3 years, 4 years. Yeah, they spend at least 5 hours a day, minimum, at least. I mean, if you're a good student, maybe 8, 9. They'll do some extra themselves. Okay, and then they memorize the Quran in 3 to 4 years. So imagine if you're just doing 1 hour. Right? And you may memorize it, but it'll maybe take you a decade. Or that's if you're like consistent on it. Okay? But if you want to memorize like the general normal time, you need to spend more hours. This is not to put someone off if they can't find any time. No. If you only, the point here is that if you want to be serious about it and you're able to, you have to give it more time. And obviously spend all those hours straight away, it won't be easy. You can't just sit down one day and sit there for like 6 hours straight. You're going to burn yourself up. So you start off with a few hours, 2, 3 hours, and slowly you add and you add and you add and you add, and it becomes easier. Like when I was in Medina, for example, when I first started, I went, as you guys know, I went at 16. So, alhamdulillah, I didn't really waste any time, but I was new to seeking knowledge. I didn't know what the concept of seeking knowledge was, what were the different sides. I didn't know any of that. So what I used to do is study class in the morning, so class was at 6:30 till Dhuhr, and then I would go by myself to Masjid Nabi in the evening, and Asr till Isha. After Isha, study. And after Isha, we would go out with the boys and we'll get a lunch, because obviously we were living by ourselves, bachelors, no one to cook us food, so we would just go out and eat, and it's just a nice way to end the day, right? And we did that. But then as time went, and the weekends I would take off. Friday, Saturday was just my time to relax. As time went on, what happened? I added in Saturday. Okay, Friday is my time to relax, Jum'ah, chill, wherever. But I would study on Saturdays now as well. And then, slowly, add in Friday. And add in after Isha as well. But not every day. Still, there were some days, one day, maybe once or twice a week I would go out. The other days I would just study, and I'll just get my food myself, get some small, and that's it. But time, and that I didn't find it difficult. Somebody may say, oh, you're doing 7 days a week from the morning to after Isha, you're going to burn out. No. I got to that level later. Once I got used to, obviously in Medina, I didn't have any other responsibilities at the time, right? So same thing with Hifz. That I remember, subhanAllah, like, I spent 10, 12, 13, I don't know how many hours it was, reciting the Quran a day with school. No problem. If you told me to do 10 hours of Quran now, it's not good, but I probably wouldn't be able to do it. Or I probably would, but I'd find it really difficult. It's not something natural to me. Why? Because I've not really done that. I've got out of that habit, which is not a good thing. Right? The third point is consistency. And this is the most important. In Quran and in seeking knowledge. The Quran and seeking knowledge. That's what the Prophet ﷺ said, أَحَبُّ الْأَعْمَالِ إِلَى اللَّهِ أَدْوَمُهَا وَإِنْ قَلَّ. The most beloved actions to Allah are those which are consistent, even if they are little. So if you just memorize, even if you're not memorizing a lot, as long as you keep it consistent, that's how you're going to make progress. We'll give an example, right? Aman, Alhamdulillah, it's a good example. From the Mutun, how much do you memorize a day? When you read 2 Fajr, how much do you memorize? 1 paragraph. About 3 lines out of the page. How many lines on a page? There's 10 lines? 3 lines. 3 lines is not a lot, if you look at how big the book is. Right? Usul al-Thalatha was how many? How many pages? Usul al-Thalatha. 30, let's say 40 pages. Let's say 40. I think it's 35 or something. Let's say 36 so that we can easily multiply, yeah? So, 3 lines. That means, let's say it takes 3 days to do a page. And then how many days to do all of Usul al-Thalatha? 108. Times by 3, yeah? 180 days. Now, 108 days. Now, how many students? Do you remember the students that attended in the beginning? There's one guy in one day memorized 3 pages. Came to me, he read like a page. He went back and memorized another page. He goes, so I can read this to you, alright? And then he came back and then another page. Right? So you're thinking, this guy, 3 pages, Allah Mubarak. He's going to smash it in 2 weeks and 12 days and he's going to finish the book. What happened? Burned himself out after 2 days and we've not seen him ever since. But alhamdulillah now, just normal consistency. We don't even sit there for long, especially now you got school, right? Sit there for like 10, 20, because Fajr is at 7:15. You need to go get ready for school. Just sit there for 20 minutes. Or 15 minutes, whatever it may be. Reads and he goes. When now it's memorized, Usul al-Thalatha. Memorized Qada Arba' and Nawaqid al-Islam. 3 books is memorized now. Allahumma barak. Yeah? Why are you laughing? Hey. You need to get to a level that I can use you as an example as well. No, look, it's okay, it's fine. Yeah? Because what you've done is more than majority of the class who are a lot older than you. Double your age, and and so on. Now, what allowed him to memorize? Consistency. What allowed him to finish? Consistency. And that's in anything. I know students, when I was in Medina, they would come and ask me, what's your advice for a beginner student of knowledge? What's your advice? And what they do is that you tell them, and they'll attend a lesson or something, and they'll go to a Dora or something. I meet them 4, 5, 6 years later, exact same question they're asking me. 6 years later, a person could start Medina University and graduate, and he's asking the exact same question. If all he did was take 1 book at a time, and did a little bit, something like Usul al-Thalatha, even if it took him half a year to finish, no problem. And Qad Arba' took him another half a year. And let's say each book took him half a year. That's 12 books he studied properly. Right? By the time that's finished. So consistency is very important. So I think these, points are very important. And lastly, finally, and this is the foundation as well, which is, taking all the spiritual means, which is making sure that you're sincere for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that you're not learning for any other reason, and that you make dua and you ask only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you stay away from sins. Sins have a big effect on a person's memory. Like Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, as he mentioned in lines of poetry, شكوت إلى وكيع سوء حفظي فأرشدني إلى ترك المعاصي وقال إن العلم نور ونور الله لا يؤتى لعاصي. That he said, I complained to my teacher Waki' regarding the weakness of my memory. So he guided me to leaving of sins. He told me to leave off sins. And he said that verily this knowledge is a light of Allah, and the light of Allah is not given to a sinner. The light of Allah is not given to a sinner. And they say that Imam Shafi'i, what happened was that he was walking and he heard a woman's anklet, little noise, and he had quick glance, like unintentionally, and he looked away. But then that caused his memory to be weakened. And some say that his memory was so strong that he would have to cover one page, because if he looked at both pages together, he would memorize them and he would get confused. So he'd cover one page and just memorize one page at a time. And likewise, Waki' ibn al-Jarrah, rahimahullah, another time they asked him that, we've never seen you teach with a book in your hand. How have you got to this level? And he said, there's a secret, there's something, but if I tell you, will you stick to it? And he said, yeah, of course. He said, leaving off sins. So these are also very important. Now, since students aren't here, we should still also recite the Quran. We'll recite a little bit, but we should have some sort of recital of the Quran, inshallah, because we get rewarded for each letter and hasanat, and there's barakah in it as well. And there shouldn't be a day of a Muslim going by him except that he recites something from the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But I'll leave it to you. What do you guys want to recite? We won't continue with what we were, but just generally, anything you guys want to recite? Just something short, 5-10 minutes. Sorry? Surah Najm. Beginning of Surah Al-Kahf. So the first 10 ayat Al-Kahf and last 10 ayat. Yeah? Okay, let's do that inshallah. Okay, everyone got their Quran, their Mus'haf? Yeah, Surah Al-Kahf, yeah? Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. Another piece of advice as well is that if you want to, perfect your recitation, your tune and so on, is to read loud, not quietly. Because that's how you're going to get your voice out. You're going to get the letters out more clearly. And to read slow, not to read fast. But not always. You should combine. You should be able to read fast and you should be able to read slow. You should have the skill to do both. But more so to recite slow. Right? Because when you do fast, you end up mumbling the words and so on. Like people who learn fast, if you attempt to recite slowly, they can't, they forget. And that happens. Sometimes I learn something fast, and then I'm reading slow in Salah, and my mind just goes blank. I'm like, I've never made a mistake here. But it's because I learned it fast. But if you learn it slow, then you can read it fast, no problem. Okay. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. الحمد لله الذي أنزل على عبده الكتاب ولم يجعل له عوجا. Yusuf, louder. قيما لينذر بأسا شديدا من لدنه ويبشر المؤمنين الذين يعملون الصالحات أن لهم أجرا حسنا. ماكثين فيه أبدا وينذر الذين قالوا اتخذ الله ولدا ما لهم به من علم ولا لآبائهم. Longer. What's that rule? لهم به. إخفاء ميم ساكن. How long is it, Awab? 2 حركات. Again. ما لهم به من علم ولا لآبائهم. كبرت كلمة تخرج من أفواههم إن يقولون إلا كذبا. فلعلك باخع نفسك على آثارهم إن لم يؤمنوا Don't say آثارهم آثارهم راك سري إن لم يؤمنوا بهذا الحديث أسفا إنا جعلنا ما على الأرض زينة لها لنبلوهم أيهم أحسن عملا وإنا لجاعلون ما عليها صعيدا جرزا أم حسبت أن أصحاب الكهف والرقيم كانوا من آياتنا عجبا أم حسبت أن أصحاب الكهف والرقيم كانوا من آياتنا عجبا إذ أوى الفتية إلى الكهف فقالوا ربنا آتنا من لدنك رحمة وهيئ لنا من أمرنا رشدا Let's go to the last 10 ayat. So, ayah 100, yeah? 101. You don't include. Yeah. الذين كانت أعينهم في غطاء عن ذكري وكانوا لا يستطيعون سمعا أفحسب الذين كفروا أن يتخذوا عبادي من دوني أولياء إنا أعتدنا جهنم للكافرين نزلا قل هل ننبئكم بالأخسرين أعمالا What did you miss out? قل هل ننبئكم بالأخسرين أعمالا الذين ضل سعيهم في الحياة الدنيا وهم يحسبون وهم يحسبون أنهم يحسنون صنعا أولئك الذين كفروا بآيات ربهم ولقائه فحبطت أعمالهم فلا نقيم لهم يوم القيامة وزنا ذلك جزاؤهم جهنم بما كفروا واتخذوا آياتي ورسلي هزوا Amam, what did you miss? You missed the mud. واتخذوا آياتي ورسلي هزوا إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات كانت لهم جنات الفردوس نزلا خالدين فيها لا يبغون عنها حولا The ha from the chest عنها حولا عنها حولا You need to practice that عنها حولا Right, you can practice that one. قل لو كان البحر مدادا لكلمات ربي لنفد البحر لنفد البحر قبل أن تنفد كلمات ربي ولو جئنا بمثله مددا قل إنما أنا بشر مثلكم يوحى إلي أنما إلهكم إله واحد فمن كان يرجو لقاء ربه فليعمل عملا صالحا صالحا ولا يشرك بعبادة ربه أحدا.
فليعمل عملا صالحا ولا يشرك بعبادة ربه أحدا.
طيب إن شاء الله stop here بإذن الله. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.